don't need a passcode. So when you're throwing, you want to pick the best clay you can find. So this clay, I know it's actually been softened up a little bit because I softened it up. But if you reach in the bag and you have like 2 or 3 different pieces in there and they're all kind of the same but not the same, you might want to just get a different bag and try to find the softest clay and the most consistent. You don't want it to be lumpy. And then instead of like cutting off like a little piece and then folding it in half a couple of times, you might be creating air pockets, which make it harder to throw. So don't do that. Take a chunk of clay so that you're not creating air pockets when you get your clay. If you do have like a couple of different pieces of clay and you're going to use them anyway, you probably want to wedge your clay. And over here in front of Paige, we got our plaster slabs. They're good to wedge your clay on. If you put down a towel first and then put down the plaster on top of that, the plaster isn't going to move around on you as much. You want it to be pretty clean. You don't want to have big dry chunks of clay on there. And all you're going to do is you're going to take your clay, you're going to press it down and away from yourself like you're making a bird, right? Then you're going to pick it up, you're going to push down and away from yourself again, and that is called the bull's head wedge, because you get something that kind of looks like a bull's head, right? What you do, or a monkey's head, whatever you want to call that, is we're going to kind of take his forehead and smush it into his nose. You do that a good 4 to 5 times. Oh yeah, see? This table needs to be tightened up. You start to get kind of a log going. So you want to keep squishing in this way as well, so you don't end up with a big hot dog of clay. But back off a little bit. Give it a roll. So you got kind of like that. Put it down. Give it a couple of pats. You got a little like puck of clay, and that's going to be a good shape to get started on the wheel. So now I'm on the wheel. So my clay's ready. I got tools. I got a bucket of water. Give yourself plenty of water. Have your sponge. Have your needle tool, okay? And some combination of wood tools, and you should try different ones and see which ones you like. Yeah? I like using this one at the bottom. I like using my rib at the bottom of the piece. Sometimes I could clean up edges and things like that with the rib. You might like a different kind of tool. The one tool I don't want you to bring over to the wheel is this metal scraper, because it's sharp. If it gets caught in the clay, it can come around and cut you. Okay? So if we see this, we're going to take it away from you so that it's nowhere near the wheel. And then on the second day, you'll use these loop tools. When I trim, you'll see how to do that. But we don't really use these on the first day. So that doesn't come over until day 2. Okay, so let's get started. First step, turn on wheel. First step, I want to get a little moisture on the wheel head, okay? Notice I took my foot off so that the wheel's just moving on its own. I'm going to squeeze out that water, kind of dry it back off. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Why do you make it wet and then dry it back off? I want it to just be slightly damp so that when I go to put my clay on there, it's going to stick to the wheel head a little bit better, okay? If you pick out a plastic bat, you really want to dry that off. You know, maybe not even wet it to begin with. But if your clay's a little bit on the dry side, the moisture will help it stick, and this one is. So a little moisture, hit the center, and then I'm going to go around. I'm going to press down like with my thumbs to really try to seal that on there so that no water gets underneath when I start the next step, which is center. Behind me on this side and on this side are pictures of the hand positions. So what I'm going to show you next, the most important thing is what's happening with my left hand, what's happening with my right hand, okay? Now, if you look online, you're going to see people doing different hand positions than you will see me doing. The idea is the same no matter how they place their hands. And so you might try different hand positions too from time to time, or things that you see online, that sort of thing. That's fine as long as you're getting the ideas, right, behind each step. The first idea is I want to push this thing in towards the center. I use my left hand to do that. I'm going to lean into it with the base of my palm. And then down on the top, because if I just push in, it's going to want to come up off the wheel or just come up, okay, if it stays stuck on the wheel. So I'm kind of pressing down to compress the clay and in to control the clay and get it towards the center of the wheel itself. When I press on the clay, it will get dry fast. So I'm going to get some water on there. I'm going to get some water on my hands. And like I said, this hand's going to press in with the base of my palm because I can use my whole arm to fight the clay, right? I can brace my arm against my leg or my hip or whatever feels like strong. And then I can use like my body weight to lean into the clay. But my fingers, they don't really do anything because they're not strong enough to squeeze the clay into the center. I got to use something like this meaty part of the base of my palm. Right? And then when I do that, when I start leaning in, oh, I didn't push down. So this is a perfect example of what not to do, right? Because I'm explaining it and I wasn't pushing down, I pushed it right off. If that happens to you, you go like, I hate this class, Mr. Waltz. Be like, okay, relax. There's a little bit of water and slip now on the bottom of my clay and on my bat. So I want to clean that off. So it's good that I have a rag close by to do that. And I'll put it back on there. Seal it back on there again. And this time I'm going to push down so that doesn't happen to me again. So it happens to everybody. Don't get upset if it happens to you. You know, that's how we learn sometimes in here. So again, water, going to press in. When I start pressing in, it's pushing back against me. And what I have to do is I have to fight. Like I am in control of you. You are just clay, and I am a strong human being who will push you around. You will not push me around. You got to fight back. Don't let the clay own you. I own you. You will do as I command. So now I'm pushing in and down, and because I'm pushing down, I can push in more. And when my hand stops getting pushed around by the clay, and I control the clay, and I back away slowly, I've now centered that clay. Okay? So, there's always somebody, right? They got their wheel going, and they're like this. They're like, is it centered, Mr. Walter? And I'm like, well, is your hands moving? You know, like, I don't know. And it's like, no, they are. You know, so it's not centered until your hands stop moving. So it's in, down, really try to control this part right here. And what some of you are noticing is that at the very base, this part of my hands is not quite as strong. So remember when I told you I like to use this or this? This is the perfect time to do it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to come in on the side, I'm going to hold this really steady, I'm going to scrape away a little bit of that clay, put that there, now I got a place to hold my tool, right? But if I hold it steady, that clay that was way down at the bottom, that was kind of pushing my hands up and down, now it's gone. So I can put some water back on there, lean back in, and get that last little bit at the bottom, and I back away slow. All right, two things that people do wrong, especially the first few times they sit down. They get excited, right? And they're throwing, their hands are moving around, you know, and they're like, I'm never going to get this. You know, and then all of a sudden they feel it, and they're like, whoa, I got it. And they let go really fast, okay? If you let go fast, what's going to happen is this, because usually when you center it, you're actually pushing it past center. You kind of have to get the centered feeling. So then when you let go fast, it stays past center. So when you feel that centered feeling, relax, slowly back away from the clay. And when it gets to center, it'll let go of you. The other thing they do is like the stylish dismount, like instead of centering and backing up back towards themselves, they go off to the side like that. And the last thing you just did is push on the clay, right? So don't go off to the side, even though it might look cool, Come right back towards your belly button. So you're gonna press down and in, and you're gonna pull back. I lost it right at the end because it got dry. There we go. I'm gonna pull right back towards myself. Okay. So that's centering. Until you learn how to center, you really shouldn't worry about anything else, right? Because if it's not centered and you try to open it up, you're gonna have more clay on one side than the other. You're gonna have one wall that's taller than the other. But once you get centered, don't wait forever. Go ahead and get started. The clay's just gonna dry out. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna open. And you'll see people doing this a bunch of ways. Some people do this thumbnail to thumbnail. And they find the center and then they bring their thumbnails together and they start going down and in like that. Okay? I, especially on a piece of ball this size, make a V with my left hand, put my index finger in the V right there. I curl it a little bit so it's stronger, like I've been doing my finger curls so that I'm strong. And then I find the tip of my finger right at the center. I start diving down in that way. This is a place where your clay is going to get dry, so you want to put a little water in there. I'm going to go down about 2/3 of the way. Another mistake that people will make, they go all the way down and hit the wood, and then you've got practice, but you have no pot because you have no bottom to your pot. So stop yourself a little bit before you think you have to. Okay? I'm going to leave about 1 inch on the bottom. We don't want a super thick bottom. Your piece will crack because it's too thick on the bottom, both when it's drying and or when it's fired. If you're not sure how far down you are, you can take your needle tool. You can put it in all the way through, down, hit the wood, slide your finger down to touch the clay, and pull it out, and then whatever's left on the needle, that tells you how much clay is there. I know what you're thinking. You just put a hole in the bottom of your piece, Mr. Walter. Start at the wall, push down on the floor, and move your finger into the middle, and it'll go away. It'll fill itself right back in. So it's open, and I'm down far enough. Now I'm going to pull back so I get that same grip, and I'm bringing my hands back towards myself to open up that hole. Again, this is a time where it might get kind of dry, so you want to wet your fingers or get your sponge, wet your piece. You want to use enough water, but especially when you're first starting, the more water you use, the more cleanup you have, so eventually you don't want to use a ton of water. All right, so it's open enough now that I can put my hand inside and outside. My left hand goes inside, my right hand goes outside so that the clay is going through and away from me. Some of you will start this way and I'll tell you to reverse your hands, okay? And it's actually, not going to happen to anybody in here, but if you have a lot of clay, you actually can hurt yourself if the clay catches your fingers and you bend your wrist that way. Whereas if it catches and goes like that, you're fine, okay? Plus, you can see what you're doing, whereas this way, your hand blocks your vision. You can't see what you're doing. So it's left hand inside, and you want to pick a finger. I won't give you the finger, but this one, or the other one that's next to it, right? And you want to figure out if you want to use the side of that finger, the tip of that finger, the knuckle. You'll see people using all sorts of things. I kind of use the side of my finger, and it's like I'm making a V with my two fingers and using the sides of them, but I'll curl this one a lot, so I'm kind of using the knuckle. And then sometimes people put the sponge on the outside between their finger, but the two fingers are doing the work. And here's what we're going to do. We want our fingers right across from each other so that they would touch like they're clapping. Yay, ceramics, I'm so excited to be, like right across from each other. If you got one here and one here, the clay is just going to go through there and do whatever it wants, right? So we're one in between and right across from each other with the clay in between, I should say. And then if you like, you might want to try using the sponge. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to push in towards the center, or I'm going to push out towards my knee, but I'm not going to think about it like I'm pinching the clay. It's one arm pushing and the other one following along, or the other one pushing. So it's like the middle school dance. It's like one leans in and the other leans away. It's like, oh, I'm very interested in you. I'm not that kind of finger, you know. Like, I'm interested in you. I keep some space there for the good Lord. You know, like we're gonna leave space between our fingers. Don't squeeze it, okay? So I'm pushing in to make it go up first. I'm pushing in. You can see this wall kind of flattening out. And as I go up the wall, that clay that I'm pushing in starts to go up. When you get to the top, sometimes you'll get this funny little rim thing. Just kind of press down on that, hold on to the top, and get that fixed. This next one, I'm going to push out towards my knee. So I'm pushing into the sponge this time. And when I push out and the fingers go up at the same rate, that's when I'm going to get like that bowl shape. When I get to the top, I can relax and just kind of let go like that. And with just 2 pulls, I've got a pretty good bowl shape going. Now, let's say I'm going up and my fingers get off from one another and I hate this class, Mr. Wall. I hate it. No, every time, you don't understand. I hate this class. You know, it's like, okay, relax. We take our needle tool, nice clean needle tool. We go a slow speed, put a finger on the inside. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tip of the needle tool and I'm going to push in below the problem area until I touch my finger. There. Come back. I'm going to grab, but not really grab, just kind of hold. I'm going to take my other finger and put it down on top. And now instead of having a soup bowl, I have a salsa bowl. Cha-cha-cha, you know? So you can fix just about anything. Not everything, but you can. So hang in there. We all make the mistakes, right? That's one of the ways that you're going to learn. So let's do the following. We're going to cut this piece, show you how to do that, and what to do before you take it off the wheel, how to clean up, and what happens the next day, and then we're done. So that right now, the inside of my bowl, there's water, okay? And if I leave that water in there, it's gonna soak into the clay all weekend, and my bowl will probably collapse. So I gotta get the water out of there, and because the water's been sitting there, I want to take a couple of fingers and press down on the floor. You'll sometimes even see like kind of water appear, like you're squeezing the water out of the floor. If you see that, you're doing it perfectly, because that's exactly what we want, is to squeeze out that excess water. And that will mean you'll be less likely to get a crack on your piece. I'm going to take our wire tool and kind of wrap it around your finger a little bit so you're not way far away from your bowl. And then you're going to take your thumbs and you're going to push down on the wire as you go under. Notice the wire is bending. I'm not keeping it perfectly straight the whole time. Sometimes people, they're like trying to hold it and keep it straight while they're cutting underneath there, and they're like, it hurts. It hurts when I do this. I'm like, well, relax. Don't pull so hard and it won't hurt. You know, just like keep it down but not straight. Then we're just going to pick this up. This is going to go over to your shelf, and you're going to dump your bucket that you used to throw with. You're going to put your bucket over the top of your piece like that, so it doesn't touch your piece, but it traps the moisture in there so it doesn't dry out too much overnight, because if you try to put a bag on it, it's just going to stick to it. Then we're going to clean up. So any wet clay that I lost during the throwing process, I want to put that on the plaster in a clean spot, and I'll wedge that up later tonight. The plaster will kind of dry it out a little bit. Take your Batman off, put it on there, take your big sponge, and if you've got a bucket of water still, or go get a clean bucket of water, you can wipe this up, soak up that water, squeeze it out. I'm gonna move this back over here for right now. But if you wait to clean up, it's a lot harder to clean up. If you do it right away, see how fast everything came off? So that's not too bad. Now, when you guys are doing it the first time, there'll probably be more water and more mess, but eventually you'll get to a point where you can do it pretty easily. So 24 hours go by, right? You come in, and this is a little too dry, but you'll get the idea. You want to trim your piece the next day. So the bottom of this piece, the person didn't do anything to, right? They just threw it and left it like it is. So we want to make the bottom look good. Typically, when you're throwing, you'll leave a little extra clay down there at the floor just to hold up the wall. If you try to go super skinny everywhere, it's going to fall down. So we want to trim away excess clay so that it's the same thickness all the way from top to the bottom. And then you can make like a little foot, which is a nice little detail on there. We have some special tools to do that with. This is when we're going to use our loop tool. Okay. And then these things, there's 3 parts to them. They're over on the shelf. You can see one's already set up over there. We should put that one away. This is called a Giffen grip. It's actually over $200 because it's a great tool, and you know, people who buy them, it'll last them for their entire lifetime. But if we lose parts, it doesn't last. So we got to take care of all the parts, right? So it's got the sliders, and then it's divided into 2 sections. So the top piece comes off the bottom piece. The bottom piece has these little spirals, and it's got these little clamps. This clamps itself onto the wheel head. Unfortunately, like that wheel head and this wheel head and that wheel head, they all look like they're the same, but they aren't really the same. So I think this one fits, yes, on this one, so I'm good. But notice that on the bottom, there are these little hashtags. Apparently it's made by a Jewish organization, just kidding. But we don't want these things to hit the posts. So if you put it down and it feels cockeyed, just sort of twist it around until it feels like you're not hitting the posts. Okay? Then these sliders go in and out, and they ride on those little spirals that are going in towards the center. And you can put them in like this with these little stilts. But for bowls, you turn them around, you put them in like that, and the soft part touches the bowl. But if you have taller forms, the stilts help. And the stilts are in this little caddy, which will also be over on the shelf. All right, I'll be fast. I can tell I'm losing you guys. Line this up with this little gap so that this guy hits and goes in like this on the center. And sometimes you have to do that off the wheel so that you can slide them in on the side. And then when you turn it, they should all go in at the same rate, and they shouldn't get pushed around. Like if they move a ½ inch or something like that, then that's not good. So the idea would be you turn the top piece but not the bottom piece. The sliders go in until they touch and hold your bowl. It shouldn't shift around at all. And you're going to take your loop tool. I keep a finger on the top, and you carve away until the bottom of your piece looks nice. Is this? See how it was up and down? Yeah. That's a little better. So now if I want it to look fancy on the bottom, I can skip a little section and start taking away some clay inside here so that it's only sitting on a little rim of clay. But this isn't quite centered, so keep in mind I don't have to have my tool up against the clay at all times. So if I like brace it against my leg, and I kind of hover, I can carve it back into center. And someone will ask, loop side, square side, totally up to you, whichever side you like to use or feels like it fits the spot. That's the spot to use. Okay, last thing. Have I said that like 4 times? This time for real. Last thing. But when you're done, see how we got clay all over the ground? It happens every time because of the Giffen grips. You know, these splash pans aren't big enough to hold everything in. So you just gotta sweep as soon as you're done. Even if somebody else is gonna come over and trim, because the minute you step up, stand up, you're gonna step in it, and then you're gonna track it all the way down the halls, and the janitors will be mad at me. All right, that's throwing and trimming a bowl. Each of you has to sit down and do it with me at least once next 2 weeks or so. And then the next try is supposed to be on your own, but I'll come watch. But if I always help you do it every single time, you'll never be able to do it without me, right? So you gotta keep trying if you want to learn how to do this. This is one of those things that when you fail, you can't give up. You have to just keep trying, and that's how you're gonna get better at it. It's not gonna be like watching this demo is gonna make you an expert person on the wheel.
I would like